Remember one year, it was a very special Christmas for me. I told my parents I didn't want anything else other than this one thing that was gonna help me have so much fun. And it was an NVIDIA graphics card. Today, we're talking about the company NVIDIA. Welcome to Stock Stories. All right, all right. Welcome to Stock Stories. Hello, my name is Alex Mason. I am your stock storyteller. On this show, we decode the business behind the stock. So we're going through every single company in the S&P 500. Today, we're going to be going over Nvidia. On today's episode, we're going to be going through the history, the business model, and some of the financials of Nvidia. And we're going to try to figure out if it's going to be a good investment in its stock or not. All right, let's get into it. The year was 1993, and Jensen Huang had this dream of seeing stereo sound and full motion video on personal computers. Now, this was the early 90s, and computing technology was definitely not what it is today. At the time, Jensen worked at another company called LSI, and he had some experience creating microprocessors at AMD, which is a company we studied on this show a couple of weeks ago. And he sat down one day with two of his buddies in a Denny's restaurant, and he came up with a business plan with them. And they realized that video was going to be the future. Full motion graphics was going to be the future of computing. And not just because it was cool, but because it required a certain level of elegance and complexity in computational problem solving that just hadn't really been done yet. So the three of them decided, okay, we're going to start a company focused on solving this type of problem. So on his 30th birthday, Jensen quit his job and started the company NVIDIA with two of his friends. And they named the company because the word NVIDIA in Latin actually means envious or to be envious of something or someone. And so they decided to focus on video games first. And video games was the priority for them because they knew that there was a lot of demand in this area. People were buying video games, people were playing them. And they figured that if they could make enough money with video game related revenue from their computational power with the chips that they were going to be making, that they could then fund research and development to solve even bigger and harder problems. Now, by 1995, they developed their very first chip. It was called the NV1. And they rolled it out. They finally got some customers for it. They finally got someone to help them produce it. And it actually grabbed the attention of game maker Sega. And Sega actually used the NV1 chip on a computer game called Virtua Fighter. And Virtua Fighter, this is an old video game, but it was actually the very first video game to use polygon graphics, 3D polygon graphics, which was a big leap forward. You didn't really see video games doing this around this time. Hey, if you're getting value out of this episode and enjoying it so far, show me some love and just tap that like button. Thank you in advance so much. So, NVIDIA started making a name for itself. They were making these really great chips, these processors for video game graphics, and they became well known. And by 1999, they actually went public, and they went public for $12 per share on the NASDAQ exchange, and they started gaining some notoriety. In fact, they created the world's first graphics processing unit, or GPU, and it was called the GeForce 256. What made this different is that, unlike a CPU or centralized processing unit, a GPU allows the CPU to focus exclusively on non graphics related tasks. So it really separated out those functions within the computer. And that ultimately makes the computer faster and more efficient when processing images and video, things like that. In the early days, they even got a really big deal from Microsoft for $200 million dollars to be the sole provider of graphics chips for the brand new Xbox video game console. So this was huge for them. And then by 2001, they surpassed $1 billion in revenue and they were added to the S&P 500. Now, the dot-com bust that happened in 2001 and 2002, it did put a damper on NVIDIA's growth, but like many other tech firms, they ended up bouncing back And over the next couple of decades, they kept growing and refining their product lines further and just advancing their technology. So, what does NVIDIA do today? Well, they make software and they make graphics processing units or GPUs. And they're very well known for this still to this day. Now, one thing that's different about NVIDIA today than the NVIDIA of the past is they've moved way beyond just video games. And now they make products for all sorts of visualizations. If you think about data in today's world, it's not just like very simple data like text on a screen or binary code. You can think of it like that. Data is becoming a lot more nuanced and complex. And a lot of the ways that we use data today is in 3D format. Think about how an autonomous vehicle is constantly scanning with sensors to figure out spatially where things are in an environment. Well, NVIDIA actually has products that help with those kinds of applications. So even though NVIDIA's strength traditionally is in gaming and data centers, those are their biggest segments, they're also gaining market share in the professional visualization segment. So think about an engineering company that needs to create a 3D model for some kind of device or product. Well, they may not be using NVIDIA software, but they may be using NVIDIA chips in the actual computers that are running those visualizations. So NVIDIA has a huge application for its products there. So I think NVIDIA, they have a clear competitive advantage compared to a lot of other companies. All of the major cloud services providers use NVIDIA because NVIDIA has the latest cutting edge technology for GPUs. In fact, out of the 500 most powerful supercomputers in the world, 355 of them use NVIDIA technology. Now, over the last 5 years specifically, NVIDIA has really taken off with its financials. Their revenue has grown at a rate of 29% annually over the last 5 years. And their operating income, their profits, have actually grown at a similar rate. So their margins, how much they keep out of every dollar that they earn in sales, has been pretty consistent over this time period. So NVIDIA is very profitable and they're a fast growing company too. And just to give you a sense of scale with the financials, NVIDIA is generating around $8 billion or so per year of operating cash flow. Now, that's a lot of cash flow that they can use to reinvest in their products or return it back to shareholders. And NVIDIA does, in fact, return some of its cash to shareholders. A lot of companies, they don't pay out a dividend. NVIDIA does pay out a dividend, but it's a very small portion of the cash flow. NVIDIA also does buy back some shares although they reinvest a lot of money for future growth. Now, as investors, we should always be thinking about what kind of risks we're taking with the certain company that we're investing in. And with Nvidia, it's in the big tech sector, right? And with tech, there's always the risk of being out innovated. But the thing here is NVIDIA has a phenomenal track record. They've been able to stay on top of their specific niche for a very long time. And I don't really see a ton of companies really competing with NVIDIA. Of course, they do have a couple of competitors. They used to have ATI, which ended up getting bought out by another company, and a few other competitors in the space. But NVIDIA really does have that dominant position. And a lot of other big tech companies would rather just partner with NVIDIA and be customers or have some sort of cross licensing agreement with their intellectual property than just fight them head to head. From a valuation perspective, I'm a little leery of the stock price right now, even though it's come down a lot. It's trading at around 44 times trailing earnings right now, which I think is still a little bit sporty, even though this is a fast growing, phenomenal company. I would like to see a bigger margin of safety in the price before initiating a position. But nonetheless, NVIDIA is, from all accounts, an amazing company. It's growing very fast and its prospects still seem very bright. There's still a lot of applications for its products that haven't been tapped yet. So I think NVIDIA is one to watch for that reason. Now, the last couple of weeks on the channel, we've been talking about the big chip makers. So we've been talking about Intel, we've been talking about AMD, and of course, today, NVIDIA. Now, if you haven't already learned about advanced micro devices or Intel, I encourage you to check those videos out right here. and learn a little bit more about this general industry because there's a lot to like about this industry as a whole. There's a lot of growth in certain areas of it. So if you want to be more informed, check those episodes out. Well, thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.